Agron, Slava, Marat, Valerie, and the gasoline tax scam. Tony meets the Russians. One of the most famous storylines on The Sopranos is of course that of Tony and the gang's run-in with the Russians. When they first appear, it seems Tony is using them for money laundering, although they would also never specify what else they might be doing together. Just like always with the show, there is a real-life inspiration behind these characters and the Italian mob's own nexus with Russian organized crime groups.
You want something? Food?
No, we're just gonna talk.
Oh, high level.
Back in the 1970s, Russians expelled a great deal of Jewish people from the Soviet Union, creating a vast diaspora, but many of them came to the United States and in particular, the Brighton Beach section of Brooklyn. This is also a storyline in the film Lord of War, and just like any group, mixed in with the hardworking immigrants was a criminal population. One such gangster, Evsei Agron, considered to be the godfather of the Russian mob in the United States. He originated from Leningrad. He was renowned for his cruelty and a brilliant mind for rackets and schemes. Firstly, when Tony comes to see Slava, he hands over some money that needs to be laundered. Slava then asks his assistant, Agron, to print out Mr. Soprano's records.
To your bank number account. Agron, прогони все копии сопрановских переводов.
Also, as a side note, the actor is in fact one of the main cinematographers of the show, Alex Sakharov, who filmed 38 episodes of The Sopranos and split duties with Phil Abraham. Sakharov himself was born in Uzbekistan, but I would assume he's Russian, or at least speaks Russian. Anyway, the point being that calling this man Agron is for sure a reference to this Yevsei Agron. Agron was perhaps most famous for running the gasoline excise tax scam. In the 1970s, New York State had passed a law that burdened tax collection onto the individual gas stations, which then had to be reported and paid to the state. However, Agron and his cronies came up with an endless series of fake businesses which bought the gas on credit and then sold it to the gas stations. After making back the money of the gas cost, they simply took the tax money and pocketed it. Now, imagine a few cents on every gallon of gas pumped in the New York area, at a minimum. A lot of money.
A lot of money in this shit.
This made Agron extremely powerful and rich. Agron also had an underling and fellow Russian Jewish gangster working with him, a man named Marat Balagula. Balagula was perhaps just as ruthless as Agron, maybe more so. As the 70s became the 80s, Balagula began to feel he could run the operations better and no longer wanted to be subservient to Agron. So, in 1983, Yevsei was gunned down outside his home in Brooklyn. Although no one has ever been charged, it is long held that Balagula was responsible in some way. With his old boss out of the way, Marat was free to run things as he saw fit. He earned tons of money with the gas scam and began buying restaurants and nightclubs in the Brighton Beach area. The local residents were both scared and in awe of him. Additionally, he dabbled in blood diamonds, drugs, and I'm sure a whole host of other crimes. So this leads me to the nexus between these gangsters and the Italian mob. While the Russian gangsters were extremely smart and good with numbers and schemes, they at times maybe lacked the requisite muscle to back up their criminal endeavors. This is not to say that they were not violent or brutal. It just seems that they were much better at coming up with complex and creative ways to steal money rather than using simple brute force. So the Italians came into play. For Agron, he had connections with the Genovese family. Following his death, with Marat now in charge, he was threatened by Colombo gangsters. They were backed up by powerful Captain Michael Franzese, who had already had his hands in another gasoline tax scam. Balagula, however, had friends in high places. He went for a sit-down with infamous mobster Gaspipe Casso and Casso's boss, Christy Tick Fernari. Casso and Christy Tick agreed to protect Balagula for a percentage of the gas tax scam profits. The main thing Casso and Tick suggested was to share part of the profits with the other families to avoid bad blood. After that, they collected millions over the years. Meanwhile, Balagula received his own mafia protection. This of course came in handy later. A rogue Russian gangster named Vladimir Reznikov came and threatened Balagula for a piece of his gas scam. Balagula of course refused, but the show of intimidation caused him to have a heart attack. While recovering in his home, he was visited by Gaspipe Casso, who he told about the incident. Anthony Casso assured Balagula he would handle it. He had Marat call a meeting at his restaurant with Reznikov, saying he would settle a deal with him. When Reznikov arrived, he was dismayed to see that Marat was not there. As he stormed back into the parking lot, he was shot and killed by the Gemini twins, Joey Testa and Anthony Center. It was rumored that for the murder, both men were made into the Lucchese family by Casso. After that, Balagula was no longer bothered by any rogue gangsters trying to take over his gasoline scam. Eventually, he was targeted by the government and went on the run for many years, before finally being arrested in 1989 in an airport in Germany. He was not a fan of life on the run and said he had almost wanted to be caught. He served a sentence for credit card fraud and later his gasoline bootlegging scheme. He was released from prison in 2004 and lived until 2009 when he died of cancer. As a final footnote, it could also be said that the Russian gangster character of Slava also took inspo from famed Russian gangster Semyon Mogilevich. Among many other crimes, he was known for financial ones, helping to launder and protect the money of Russian oligarchs and politicians, among others. He resorted to violence when he needed to, but was mostly known for being extremely clever and smart. He has never been captured by Interpol despite being chased for more than 20 years. Where his story crosses over with Sopranos is due to one scam in which he created a shell company in the Channel Islands of England, which he used to manipulate stocks around the world, making himself a fortune. This is why Slava says to Tony,
Same drill. Isle of Man, 4 days, clean as whistle.
Isle of Man, of course, is another Channel Island. The Channel Islands themselves are known for being offshore financial havens, even to this day. In an interview, they asked Semyon Mogilevich why he created a company in the Channel Islands, to which he responded,
Why did you set up companies in the Channel Islands?
The problem was that I didn't know any other island. When they taught us geography at school, I was sick that day.
What made you choose that location?
I didn't choose it. I bought an off-the-shelf company.
And it happened to be an offshore company.
No, I wanted an offshore company.
Why?
To pay less taxes.
Again, I'm not an expert and certainly wasn't in the writer's room, but I'm certain that all these were used as inspiration for Tony's relationship with the Russians and the Russian gangsters themselves.
You're not gonna believe this. He killed 16 Czechoslovakians. Guy was an interior decorator.
His house looked like shit.